Welcome in. Y'all gonna have to ignore my family back there in the background. I don't know what they're doing back there. I just know they're being loud. So if you can hear them, we're gonna have to tune them out. Um, should be in the same place on YouTube that it is every Monday. As far as I know, it's there. I set it up to be there. So we're gonna start off talking a little bit of basketball. I know it's been almost a week since the season ended, kind of with a dud there in Little John against Morehead State in the NIT. And I'll talk a little bit about the state of Clemson basketball and Brad Brownell. And feels like there is some major dissension inside this fan base when it comes to the basketball program. And I tend to, more often than not, I try to leave my opinions on the back burner and focus more on what is and the reality instead of talking about what I think should happen or so and so needs to be fired. Especially when it comes to, I'm not calling for any coach's job ever. It's not in my wheelhouse. It's not what I'm here to do. That leads me. That leads. I get called smug, arrogant, condescending. I have a very sarcastic sense of humor. If I come off that way, so be it. I don't care. I tend to focus on the what is and the realities. I don't like to play make believe. I get it. People are extremely frustrated with the basketball program. I've been watching Clemson basketball since I was a little kid, and I am pushing 50 years old, so I absolutely get it. I know the frustrations with Clemson basketball. And I would no doubt agree that if you ask yourself, has the Clemson basketball program maybe hit its ceiling under the current coaching staff after 13 years? I tend to think it probably has. Now, outside of that, this is where we're at. This is the reality of the situation. There's not going to be any coaching change. You can like it, lump it, whatever. It's just what is. Having said all that, if you go back, people keep talking about the letter that Graham Neff wrote last year, talking about it was make or break time for Brad Brownell. If you go back and reread that thing, nowhere in it does it say Brad Brownell is getting fired if they don't make the NCAA tournament. I think a lot of people assume that's what it meant, but that is not what it said. People just inferred that, and it kind of, and a majority of the people inferred that. I'm not even sure if that's what was meant to be implied. Maybe it was, but there was a lot of. I mean, he left himself some wiggle room in there. And Graham Neff is a very smart guy. I would think that was done purposely for a situation exactly like we have right now. I don't care what happened against Morehead State. That was a team that probably deserved a tournament bid. Yeah, they crapped the bed again in the NIT, but up until that night, if Pitt's in, Clemson should be in, period. I mean, I don't know how you make an argument for Pitt and not Clemson. That's just me. So if you're making your decision based on you think your team got screwed, obviously you're going to bring Brownell back. Then you got to factor in how much it would cost to fire him. $3 million off the top, plus what it takes to hire the next guy. I mean, it just this is the reality of the situation. There's 3 years. I think there's 3 years left on his deal at the moment. It runs through 2026. And I get all the arguments about how it's up to Brownell to have his players motivated, yada yada yada, for a game like that against Morehead State, because I think that was a team that absolutely looked like they played like they were still reeling from not getting into the tournament. Um, every shot seemed to be short and off the front of the rim. And I understand all those arguments. It's Brownell's job to have his team ready. I get it. I agree to a certain extent. But at some point, the players have got to accept some responsibility in this thing too. They got to go out there and perform. Head coach can only do so much. And I'll probably be once again wrongly labeled as a Brad Brownell apologist here, which I'm not. Again, I would rather focus on the realities. There's not going to be a new head coach at Clemson basketball next year. We know that. That was made clear before the NIT game. I have been saying for weeks that there was not going to be any dismissal. I mean, you don't fire a guy that finished third in the league. I don't care how down the league is. The league's been down before. Clemson still never finished third in the league. Yeah, if you fire him after finishing third in the league, making it to the quarters or whatever, quarters or semis or whatever it was at ACC tournament, probably should have got into the NCAA tournament. If you fire him, you make it that much harder to hire the next guy. Because if you try and go out and get somebody that's already established, he's going to say, golly, man, I go there, finish third, do all this, and they still going to fire me. So just the realities of the situation. It don't got to like it. A lot of people don't, but that's where we are here. I've already seen one kid transfer out since the end of the season. Chauncey Gibson, he redshirted last year. Only spent one season in Clemson. So that's the nature of the business these days. I'll be surprised if we don't have at least one more. You're always going to have usually at least one or two every year in basketball now. I mean, it's just a record number of kids hit the portal in the first 48 hours that the window opened. So, I mean, it's what every coach is going to deal with. Like I said the other day, on the, the downside is Gibson was a kid with a lot of potential. Top 200 guy, if I'm not mistaken, depending on where you look at, a low 4-star, high 3-star guy. But he had a lot of potential. And Clemson needs guys that can shoot. Bright side, it opens up another spot to let Brownell go and hit the portal. And that is something he's had some success. That is something he has had some success with, is finding guys in the portal. So gives him another spot to go get a veteran guy, probably a wing, somebody that can shoot it, because that's what they need. Need somebody to kind of step up and help fill the absence of Hunter Tyson, because he's one of the guys not coming back. I'm fully expect PJ Hall go test the draft orders and be back next year, barring him being told he's a first-round pick, which I don't think he is at this point. So it is absolutely no doubt, though, hard to stay emotionally invested in a team, or let's not say team, a program that continues to punch you in the gut, so to speak. It's just one gut punch after the other. Clemson had no business losing that game to Morehead State in the NIT. No business. They were a 15-point favorite at home and just totally crapped the bed. And you can make the argument that crapping the bed in Louisville is what kept them out of the tournament. Although, I mean, I lean more towards thinking it was the out of conference strength of schedule. But, you can make the argument that Louisville was one of the things that kept them out of the tournament. They crapped the bed there, crapped the bed at Boston College. I know they were dealing with some injuries, but those are games you should win. Those are games you got to win. It's hard to win basketball games on the road, but you got to win the ones you're supposed to. And there are only a few that you are expected to win on the road each year, it seems. You're only favored or if you're Clemson, you're only favored in a few, maybe a couple times on the road all year. Clemson, Louisville, you got to win those games. Morehead State, you got to win that game. Period. It's just a bad look, and it makes it extremely hard for fans to stay emotionally invested, especially after 13 years. And it's kind of like we've seen this movie before. But it is what it is. You're going to have at least one more year of it. Like I said, it would cost the school $3 million to fire Brad Brownell if they did so right now. Matter of fact, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think the buyout's $3 million throughout the remainder of the deal. I have to go back and check that. But then you got to factor in what it costs to hire the next guy. And based on the limited conversations I've had, I'm not sure Clemson's goal the next time they have to go out and hire a head coach should be targeting a mid-major guy or a FCS guy, the hot, young, up-and-coming guy. That's what I mean. We got that with Brad Brownell right now. They are doing that right. They've been that route. I tend to, knowing the little bit I know about Graham Neff and his love for basketball, because Neff got it. He has been heavily involved in that basketball program during his time at Clemson, so he loves basketball. When that time comes, I think they'll probably at least attempt to hire an established guy. Might not end up being able to do it, but I think the effort will at least be made. You'll be able to find somebody that wants to coach at Clemson. Make no mistake. Even if you have to go a Bob Ritchie type at Furman or Kelsey down there at College of Charleston, there are plenty of coaches out there that would love to come cut their teeth in the ACC. Make no mistake. Now, if your goal is to go hire an established guy, it might be a little bit harder. You're going to have to pay him, and you absolutely can't send a message that finishing third in the ACC isn't going to be good enough. So I tend to lean on the side of thinking that, that the school is kind of in between a rock and a hard place right now. And best thing to do, just let things play out. Think long term. Because I do think we are probably hitting or nearing the end. I mean, it kind of feels that way. It feels like there's some apathy in the fan base. It's going to be interesting to see attendance figures for next year, because they were up a little bit this year. I know somebody told me they were up a little bit this year. Let's see if they stay up again next year or take a drop, because winning cures all. And if they can come out and win, people will come. But they have some rough spots, and they take a step back from what we saw this year. We might see what we saw first round at NIT there with a arena that was not even half full, and they were giving away tickets to that game for free. Students got in for free, and they couldn't even half fill the place, and that's sad. So I mean, apathy. That's what we have. Apathy. That's what I think. That's where I think we're at with Clemson basketball right now. Apathy. Yeah, I hated when Rick Barnes left. Those to me, those years there with Barnes, when Tim Duncan was at Wake Forest and he had Greg Buckner and McIntyre and those guys, that was probably the most exciting time I've had as a basketball fan. Those 2 or 3 years there with that crew. They never could get over that with Tim Duncan hump, but this is a different era now, and some of Oliver Purnell's teams were fun too. He had to use that. I call it a gimmick. The full court press to compete in ACC, and usually when they got to the tournament, they'd get exposed. But the way Purnell left, and Purnell left kind of in the middle of the night and really left the cupboard bare. I know Brownell took that team his very first year to the tournament with Purnell's guys, but after that, there was nothing in the pipeline coming. He's kind of left the cupboard bare. But yeah, I guess it shows it can be done. Those were different eras. This is a different era now, so. Would a top tier basketball team even work in Clemson? How is the attendance? USC sells out some of their women games in the Colonial Life Arena. They don't have any problems with attendance for women's basketball in Columbia. I've seen Little John sell out on a weeknight when the right team's in town. So I don't buy that argument. If you put the right product on the court, people will come. Greenville's right down the road. Little John doesn't hold but 8,000 people. It's not like you have to fill 80,000 seats. I had this conversation with somebody the other day. Somebody told me that they had to count on fans traveling 2 hours away to fill the place. I don't buy that argument at all. There's enough people in Clemson, Anderson, Seneca, Greenville, those surrounding areas to fill up Little John. Especially on a weekend. Clemson sold out multiple games this year. They were all on Saturdays. I want to say they sold out one during the week. I'd have to go back and look. I was meant to go back and look when I had that conversation, and I didn't ever do it. But I want to say the second game against that when they hosted Virginia on a weeknight, that it was sold out. If it wasn't, it was close to it. If it's not on YouTube, I don't know why it should be. I set it up that way, the same way I do every week. Yeah, no, I don't think any Clemson fan wants another Larry Shai. Larry Shai was great guy, just did not have much success at Clemson. That was just it turned out to be a disaster. um, yeah, and me and you gonna agree to disagree on that sentiment, Eddie. I'm not buying that fans have to come from 2 hours away to fill up Little John. There's more than enough people in the surrounding areas. And Greenville's a half hour away. Greenville is not the same town it was 20 years ago. That is a thriving, city. There are a lot of people there. I hear the argument all the time that Clemson's a football school. If you're a football school, you can't have success in basketball, and that's another argument I don't buy. Florida has shown us it's able to be done. Texas has done it. Florida State's has success. There are plenty of examples of football-first schools having success in basketball. Alabama's doing it right now. Florida sustained it for a while. Texas sustained it for a while. Um, Florida State has some sustained success. Now, they didn't win national titles, but they were putting a fantastic product on the floor and they were winning games. It's I do not buy that argument at all. That a football school can't have success in basketball. It can be done. You got to get the right buy-in from the school, and you got to have the right guy leading the program. Yeah, Alabama's doing it right now. We'll see if they can sustain it. To me, it's more about sustain it and do it for a few years, like Florida when Billy Donovan was there. Man, they were killing it in basketball, and that's absolutely a football first school. Auburn's had some success in basketball. I mean, when I say success, I mean getting to the tournament consistently and winning games in the tournament. So, I mean, I'm not necessarily talking about Final Four runs. The SEC's also got a lot more money to invest in their basketball programs. That's why SEC basketball is one of the biggest reasons why it is so much better now than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. They are investing the money. Yeah, tough weekend on the baseball diamond. Eric Backus just gonna need some time. I I still fully believe he is the right guy for that job. It's just going to take a little bit longer. I think he's probably got a little bit more work to do than he realized at first. But when you have no pitching depth and you get a couple of pitchers injured, that's brutal. It's hard to it's hard to win in the ACC that way. When you have no pitching depth, it's hard to win. Period. When you add in a couple of injuries, and that makes it even worse. A very frustrating game yesterday. Still not able to wrap my head around the way that substitution was done there when they took Grice off the mound and left him in, and the way they did it. The pitcher had to hit for himself the rest of the game, so they pinch hit for the pitcher every time. I asked Eric about that after the game, and I don't know. He didn't really have a good answer, but gambled and lost there. Probably should have let Jackson Lindley hit in the eighth, because after him, you had nobody in that bullpen except for Billy Barlow, who is nowhere near the Billy Barlow of last year. Ty Olenchuk, who has done nothing more than serve up batting practice, and Jay Deal and guys like that. Once you pinch hit for Lindley, it was over, man, and it was frustrating to watch. Yeah, Brownell's got a couple of scholarships, maybe even 3, that he can use in the portal. He actually had a scholarship in his pocket that he didn't use last year. Gibson transfer and opens up a spot. They got a freshman signed coming in, so that takes one of the spots. But you got Hunter Tyson leaving and Brevin Galloway's leaving, so you got 2 leaving, 1 coming in, 3rd leaving due to transfer. So that's 2 open spots plus the scholarship he had in his pocket. So he's got some options there, and I fully believe that's why they only signed 1 in this class, so they can use those others on the portal. All right, we already jumping into recruiting, huh? The last 2-3 years, our recruiting has suffered. If top 10 recruiting is suffering, I guess okay. I recruiting hit a little bump in the road when Venables left. They had 3-4 guys decommit, hurt them in that class. Class still finished top 10, I think, by all their services but one. One had them 11th. Last year they had a top 10 class with probably the best defensive line haul in the country. I don't know if I would say recruiting is suffering. The only thing, NIL has changed recruiting. And it's really impacting the running back and the wide receiver positions. The more highly rated guys, the more sought after receivers, they are, demanding. They are, not demanding is not the right word, but they're not out there saying, hey, you got to pay me this. That's not what I mean when I say demanding, but they have a high NIL value. They tend to create bidding wars between schools because they're that good. They're that talented. Dabo Swinney's not getting into bidding wars. I think Clemson's got a very competitive NIL package there. I think what they do is very competitive, but they're not going to bid on a guy. So it kind of takes you out of some of the battles for those top-rated wide receivers, those 5-star guys, high 4-star guys. And I'll be honest with you, I'm kind of anxious to see how this plays out because I think Clemson was at their best when they were finding the right fits, not necessarily bringing in all these 5-star receivers. Once they started bringing in all the 5-stars like Joseph Ngata and those guys, Frank Latson and the high 4-stars, Bo Collins and Takari Collins, I thought wide receiver play fell off some. Not to say those guys aren't talented, but I think, they just missed on some guys. And had some guys dealing with injuries. So, but NIL is going to impact the way Clemson recruits wide receivers. It's going to make evaluations that much more important, kind of like it was 5 years ago before the national title runs, 5, 6, 7 years ago. Yeah, we've already seen the headlines of Saban's told a couple of kids to kick rocks when they came demanding this and demanding that. I think Clemson tends to focus more of their NIL dollars on the guys on the roster. I think it's more incentivized. And I'm not saying that the freshmen don't get anything. I'm sure they absolutely do, but I think the focus is on the guys on the roster because tampering's so rampant now. It doesn't matter if the guys in the portal, people are reaching out to the players on your roster, offering them this and offering them that, and you got to be able to have a way to keep them. But, I don't know that I'd say recruiting has really suffered. It's not like Clemson was bringing in all these top 5 classes. I think Clemson's finished in the top 5 twice in recruiting in the Dabo era, twice. So top 10's been about the normal. As long as you stay in that top 10 range, I think you're okay. You start falling out of that top 10 range and get down closer to 15, maybe then I might say it would be suffering then. But Clemson is, there's still guys out there. Are still enough guys out there that realize that the long-term money is in the NFL. Very few guys are getting these big 7-figure deals coming out of high school. again, I think what Clemson offers is very competitive to what a lot of the other schools offer. So I don't think it's hurting them a ton. I think it's hurting them a little bit with running backs and wide receivers. But Clemson has all, or let me say receivers, not really running backs so much, because Clemson is always, there's this myth out there that Clemson has routinely signed these big time running backs, and that's just really not the case. Demarcus Bowman was one, um, Will Shipley was one, Phil Maffa was kind of highly rated, but most of them, Maffa was more like Travis Etienne, a top 200 guy, not a top 100 guy. They have found the guys that fit their system and developed them. So I think it's gonna hurt you at receiver more than running back, because Clemson, granted, they've struggled a little bit the last couple of classes getting a running back. I think that had more to do with Shipley and Pace and Maffa being on the roster and kids seeing that, but they got their guy in this class. So, but I just think it's going to hurt some at wide receiver. Again, makes the evaluations that much more important. Like, they are courting TJ Moore right now. If you go to 24/7 and pull up his profile, it'll tell you he's not even ranked in the top 40 wide receivers in the country. If you go turn on his film says something entirely different. That kid is a player. There's a reason why all the big schools are after him, and it's not because he doesn't rank inside the top 40 at his position. It's because he is dynamic and he has got an extremely high ceiling, and he looks like he is going to be very good. And those are kind of the guys that Clemson, had their success with, guys like Mike Williams and Luke Hopkins and not Sharon Pete, but those guys that they weren't high 5-star guys. They weren't top 100 players. They were a little lower rated than those top guys. And Clemson made their wide receiver reputation on the backs of those guys. Heck, one of them was a walk-on. I mean, you don't have to recruit 5 stars at wide receivers to be successful. You got to have a competent quarterback for starters. You got to have consistent quarterback play, which Clemson's not had for 2 years now. I think that's going to change this year. But I think Clemson signed one of his best offensive line classes in a long time last cycle with those 3 guys. I think Chris Fazzina is a fantastic quarterback prospect. I love the receivers Clemson signed in 2023. No, none of them are 5-star guys. Noble Johnson's kind of like TJ Moore. It's almost like he's overlooked. But when you turn on the film and you watch him and he just pops, he's dynamic. I think he is going to fit in fantastic with Garrett Riley's scheme. I love kid from Greenville, Tyler Brown. And the one that doesn't get talked much about is Ronan Hannafin. He was a higher 4-star guy, one of those top 2. Heck, he might have been, I forget where he's ranked, but he's definitely ranked inside the top 200. And nobody talks about him. He's 6'4". He's a big boy, and he can run. Doesn't get here to the summer, but he kind of gets overlooked in this class. I mean, I think Clemson's 2023 recruiting class is I think it was a great class. So I'm not sure I would say Clemson's suffered on the recruiting trail in the past 2 to 3 years. Again, the 2022 class suffered a little bit on the defensive side with those 3-4 guys decommitting. I think 3 of them were defensive guys. Other than that, I think it's been status quo. Yeah, Sammy Brown was back last Wednesday, kind of an unadvertised visit. Took in the scrimmage. I haven't talked to him since he was here the last week, but Yeah, Kendrick. Mike Bellamy was the other one I was trying to think of with DeMarcus Bowman. I couldn't think of his name. Both those guys ended up transferring out too. Anyways, yeah, Sammy Brown was back on campus. He's going to he's going to take officials to Clemson, Georgia, Oklahoma, Ohio State, and I think Tennessee's the other one. Yeah, I think this is definitely Clemson, Georgia. If you kind of follow the visits, Clemson and Georgia is the place he's visited the most. I don't even think it's close. He was at multiple games last year. He was at Elite Junior Day in January. He's already been back. He's coming back in June, and we're fixing to start nearing the finish line with him. He's going to take his officials in June, and we're probably looking at a July decision, definitely before the start of his senior season. And this is a kid. If you go and look at all the interviews he's done, he's pretty good about giving interviews. He'll talk to pretty much anybody. I've had 2 or 3 long conversations with him. So I mean, but he always talks about culture. Culture's big with him, and if you're Clemson, I think you got to really like where you stand. You know, there's not a ton of depth at linebacker. He can come in and compete right away to play. It's not anything like Georgia's got on their roster loaded with 5-star guys at linebacker. Heck, it's possible both Trotter and Carter could be gone after the season and really open up some playing time for him. I mean, but if you're Clemson, you have got to think you're sitting really good. You are in a great position at this point. The way Clemson sets that official visit weekend, last year was the first time they did it. They did it that first weekend in June, and it's done that way by design because you can only host officials during the month of June. And over the last couple of recruiting cycles, we've seen kids take their unofficials in the spring or their unofficials in the fall and then more in the spring to kind of set up those June officials to see where they're going to take those June officials. And then a bunch of them make decisions in the summertime before their senior season starts. So Clemson wants theirs on that first weekend in June, first weekend that you can do those official visits, and they want to set the bar. They want kids to compare every visit they take after to that first visit to Clemson. Because one thing Clemson does well is big recruiting events like that, those weekend type deals where they come in on Friday and stay till late Saturday, maybe even till Sunday. Clemson rolls out the red carpet for those guys, man, and they really knock it out of the park. They set the bar extremely high, and they want every other visit that kid takes the rest of the month to have to live up to that visit. So Brown will be one of the guys in town that weekend. He told me a couple of weeks ago he was coming, so fully expect him there. He'll be at Georgia the next weekend, and then he goes to Oklahoma, Ohio State, Tennessee. I can't remember if that's the right order, but those are the other 3. I'm talking about the last few years, just since the national, going back to right before the national title run to now. Yeah, Spiller was one, James Davis was one. That's going way back. But Clemson's not making their living bringing in 5-star running backs and these high 4-star running backs. They made their living in this run on Wayne Gallman and Travis Etienne. Jamie Harper never lived up to the billing. Tavian Feaster never lived up to the billing. DeMarcus Bowman transferred out. Mike Bellamy transferred out. I mean, my point is the last 6-7 years after Clemson's really became elite. They're not doing it on the backs of 5-star running backs. I mean, yeah, you can find one here and there every 3-4 years. You go back 15 years and you can find a few more. But I mean, if you go back just the last 10 years, I mean, Spiller, Davis, Harper, Ellington, all those guys were, more than 10 years ago. I'm talking about the last 7, 8, 9, 10 years. It's, kind of since Tony Elliott took over running backs. They just not landed a bunch of elite level running backs coming out of high school. And the couple that they have landed, Shipley, he's the one that stayed. Bowman and Bellamy bolted early. So I'm kind of talking last decade. Man, I don't have any idea how true that is. No, the 2023 class was not 13th nationally. It was in the top 10. I mean, I don't think recruiting's really fallen off any at all. They had a couple of recruiting classes that finished inside the top 5, and that's it. All the rest of them have been top 10 classes. 2023 was another top 10 class. 2022, I think one service had them 11th, but again, you had the decommitments there late, and they weren't able to recover from them. You don't have a coaching change, that class is easy inside the top 10. Yes, Clemson is not taking the highly rated guys, signing highly rated guys at wide receiver like they did for a 3-4 year period there. They are kind of back to doing what they did before that. And I'm kind of anxious to see how it works out. I talked about this a minute ago. NIL is having a massive impact on wide receiver recruiting. Massive. Those guys are getting big money. The 5-star receivers are getting big time money. And let's be honest, the 5-star receivers Clemson's brought in the last 6, 7, 8 years, I mean, it ain't like they all lit it up or anything. Most of them didn't work out. A couple of them were misses. One of them transferred out. I mean, it is what it is. So when you know that you're not going to get the big time 5-star guy, and you got to settle for the mid 4-star, lower 4-star guys, again, that makes your evaluations that much more important. I think Clemson was at its best when they were finding the best wide receiver for what they wanted to do and not finding the best wide receiver and trying to make him fit what they wanted to do. And I think that's what they're trying. They've kind of got back to that a little bit in this last class, and that's what we're seeing in this 2024 class with guys like Braylon Staley and TJ Moore and Alex Taylor. And, Jonathan Paylor, too. He's a good one. We're going to find out a lot about these young wide receivers this year, though. I mean, I know a lot of fans are sour on Tyler Grisham and blame the lack of production on him, and maybe it turns out that turns out to be the case. I think we'll have the answer to that question this year because you got a quarterback that can push the ball down the field and get it to his receivers now. You don't have that inconsistent guy you've been stuck with the last 2 years, and you got a new offense that's going to greatly benefit the receivers. It's going to make it easier on them. They're not quite having to learn quite as much with flipping the field all the time. They're going to stay on the same side, and it makes it a little more simple. So I think this new system is going to greatly benefit wide receivers, greatly benefit quarterbacks. So we're going to find out a lot about these receivers because I think these are all Grisham's guys now, except for maybe Bo Collins. I want to say Jeff Scott was originally I think when they first started recruiting Bo that Jeff Scott was still here. Can't recall 100% for sure, but pretty much all these guys are Grisham's now, and you've got a quarterback that's going to get them the ball. So we're going to find out. Going to find out this year for sure. Clemson's got another BT Potter already on campus. His name's Robert Gunn. He redshirted last year after tearing his ACL his senior season in high school. Remember that name, Robert Gunn. And they actually had a punter that redshirted last year. His name's Jack Smith. They brought him in on scholarship because he's that good. Just needed to get a little bit more consistent. He is 6'4", 240 pounds, and he is all muscle, and he can boom it. If he can get a little bit more consistent, I would not be shocked at all if he was not the starting punter this year because we saw Aiden Swanson was very inconsistent last year. Any program changers in the 2024 class? You know what? I don't know. We'll have to see who they get. We'll have to see who they sign. It's all about who you get. I'm anxious to see which one of some of these offensive linemen they're after, who they get. They're going to take 3 or 4 this cycle. So and they've got some good ones on the radar. So let's see who they get there. They're only going to take a couple of defensive tackles. I think Sammy Brown's got the potential to be a difference maker. Program changer, I don't know. That's hard to say. We'll have to see who they signed, though. Right now, there's only 4 or 5 guys committed, so no program change. Nobody I would classify as a program changer that's committed yet. I love the tight end kid that's committed, Christian Betancourt. I think he's going to fit in remarkably in this offense. I think Garrett Riley's going to make it a concerted effort to get the tight ends even more involved. So, yeah, I ain't sure. I'm not sure what you're asking me there. Who are you talking about? Yeah, Heaven Brown Schuler's getting to the end too. I've said it for months. I love where Clemson stands with him. Interior defensive lineman. We'll see if he makes it to June. But yeah, he's getting to the end too. All right, Michael. I see where you said you think it was ridiculous Saban paid that much. That's not quite how NIL works. The school does not pay the players. That money has to come through donations. So it's not actually the school paying them. You know how IPTE is the fundraising tool for Clemson. It's the Booster Club. They got a couple of NIL collectives, Tiger Impact, dear old Clemson. And those two things raise money and funnel the money to the players, the NIL money. It's not the schools. They're not in charge of that. I mean, I'm sure the schools have some say-so over who gets how much, but the money doesn't come from the school, just to be clear. And I have no idea how much Alabama paid in NIL money last year. $20 million seems a little high, but I don't know. Aaron Nolan, okay. You're talking about him losing his offense. Okay, I got you now. I thought you was asking me about a coach. I didn't know who you're talking about there. We'll see. I really like Aaron Nolan. I think he's one of the top quarterbacks in this class. We'll see if I think he's going to keep being successful. I think he's that good. I don't know who the new OC is, but I have watched a lot of his film, and that kid can throw it. He can run it. He's got. I mean, he just sees the entire field. He makes quick decisions. I mean, I really like Aaron Nolan. We'll see if Clemson might have got in a little too late on this deal, though. He insists he's going to make a decision in April. Probably won't give Clemson another chance to get him back on campus before making that decision. And that would mean that they would have to have done enough in that one visit to win him over. Heading to Miami for an overnight stay this weekend, if I want to say. Miami was probably who was holding all the cards heading into the spring. We'll see. We'll see how things work out with him. I don't have a good feeling about Nolan and Clemson, but man, I think that kid's going to make a hell of a quarterback for wherever he lands. He's going to be really good. And if that is it, I will bid y'all farewell. Appreciate y'all tuning in. As always, we'll do it again next Monday, 7 p.m. Appreciate it.